Hello, Year 6. We're going to carry on with the jam donut that ruined my life. Almost immediately, Rosie Taylor, aka Nosy Rosie, thrust her hand up in the air. She said, "I'm getting you done." Rosie Taylor sits next to me in class. I don't want to be horrible, but she's got big, goggly frog eyes and a small, mean mouth like a slug's bum. Okay, sorry, that was pretty horrible. Both of these features are very handy for her hobbies, which are 1, spying on people, and 2, getting them in trouble. The other thing about Rosie is she absolutely hates me and always has done. I've never really understood why. I'm pretty quiet and I don't like to bother people. "Shh," I said, "please, I'm really Roman," said Mrs. McDonald sharply, her big round cheeks starting to turn red, which is a sign she's getting cross. "That's twice. Sit next to me on the bus." This was terrible, but perhaps not as bad as sitting next to Kevin the Volcano Harrison. Every cloud has a silver lining, I guess. Rosie Taylor gave me a smarmy look and then pulled out a little pocket mirror and began fiddling with her hair, another of her annoying habits. She seemed delighted I was in trouble, even if it wasn't for the donut. "Mrs. McDonald, Mrs. McDonald," yelled Darren Gamble, leaping up and down and waving his arm about. "Can I sit next to you too?" I've mentioned Darren Gamble a few times. He's this strange, twitchy kid in my class with a funny little shaved head that makes him look like a baked bean. He only came to our school 3 weeks ago. According to him, he got expelled from St. Joseph's for accidentally setting fire to a nun. Seriously, a nun. I don't know if that's true, but he's always doing weird stuff like climbing on the school roof or eating worms. On his first day here, he brought a dead magpie in with him in his rucksack. Another time, he had to go to hospital after sucking out the ink from an entire box of felt tips. Most of my class find him funny, but he gives me the collywobbles, so I try to avoid him. I don't like people who are unpredictable. If my life's like a jam donut, his is like an explosion in a bakery. Miss Clegg, Gamble's teaching assistant, looked up from the text message she was pretending not to send under the table. "Good idea," she said, rubbing her eyes. She always sounds like she's yawning. I don't think Miss Clegg likes working with Gamble too much. I once heard her talking to another teaching assistant, and she called Gamble "that snot-nosed little turd," which wasn't very nice. Another time, she broke wind in maths and then blamed it on him. This wound him up so much he drank a whole bottle of Tipp-Ex. I have to say I do feel a bit sorry for her. Until Gamble came along, Miss Clegg seemed to just float about the classes, doing the photocopying and stuff. Now she's got to spend all her time with him in case he tries to destroy the place. It must be one of the worst jobs ever, like washing a sumo wrestler's nappies or tasting cat food for a living. "Mrs. McDonald, I've got well good music on my iPod," said Gamble. "We can share earphones, miss. All my favourite bands are on there. Hedgehog Bloodbath, The Kitten Slicers, Cheese Grater for Your Eyeballs. I've even got the new album by Sweaty Steve and the Exploding Grandmas. It's totally banging, miss. You'll love it." "Darren, I think I've told you before that I don't really like heavy metal music," said Mrs. McDonald. "You'll be with Miss Clegg." Miss Clegg went back to texting. "Great, stuck with him all day," I heard her mutter. "Aw," Gamble moaned. "Can't I sit on your lap, Mrs. McDonald? You're my most favouriteest teacher ever." I'm not sure why, but for some reason Gamble loves Mrs. McDonald. On his first day, he latched onto her like a veruca, and she hasn't been able to get rid of him since. "Did you take your tablets this morning, Darren?" Mrs. McDonald asked. Everyone giggled. "No, miss," said Gamble, bouncing up and down in his chair. "I gave them to the dog." Mrs. McDonald closed her eyes and pinched the bridge of her nose. "That sounds like animal cruelty to me." Gamble held up his hand to stop her. "Don't worry, miss. It's for his own good. This week he's been a bit bitey." "Bitey?" she asked. "Yeah," said Gamble. "He always gets like that when he's got worms up his bum." Most of the class laughed. Mrs. McDonald slapped her hand to her forehead. Kevin, the volcano, Harrison, drew deep breaths like he was going to throw up. Gamble grinned. My uncle's the same when he gets worms up. Thank you, Darren, interrupted Mrs. MacDonald. You and Miss Clegg had better sit behind me. This is going to be fun. OMG. The drive to the aquarium was definitely not fun. For a start, I couldn't sneak even a nibble of my doughnut while I was sat next to Mrs. MacDonald. She kept pointing out the window and saying teachery things like, "Those clouds are called cumulus. Don't you think they look like fluffy flying guinea pigs?" I shrugged and said nothing. They looked like clouds to me. On top of this, Kevin, the volcano, Harrison, erupted before we'd even left the car park and spent the whole journey with his head in a bucket. He was across the aisle from me in the pukers seat, you know, the one they reserve at the front of the bus so the travel-sick children can see out of the windscreen. It smelled awful, like old yoghurt mixed with satsumas. He kept turning to me between spews and saying things like, "Roman, I think there's a cola bottle stuck in the back of my nose," and, "It's definitely getting milkier with every heave." It was horrible, but at least it killed my appetite for a while. And even worse, all the way to the aquarium, Gamble was shaking my chair violently and patting me on the head and pinching my ear. And he just kept on talking. Constantly. "Rosie Taylor's telling everyone you've got a doughnut in your pocket. Can I have some doughnut? Mrs. MacDonald, make him give me some doughnut." Whenever Gamble's being annoying, Mrs. MacDonald and Miss Clegg try to ignore him. I think they expect him to get bored after a while, but he never does. It's like he's a hyperactive wasp in a tin. At least the teachers also ignored what he was saying about the doughnut in my trousers. Even so, I knew I had to eat it soon. It was leaking jam into my pocket. I was relieved when we reached the aquarium and I could finally escape. Straight away we had to line up in our pairs. I was worried about who I'd end up with, but Mrs. MacDonald said she'd be Kevin the volcano's Harrison's partner, just in case, and Gamble should stick with Miss Clegg. When she heard this, Miss Clegg looked up in the sky and said, "Oh, are you kidding me?" She isn't very good at hiding her feelings. I was left alone. Lovely stuff, I thought. I'll wait till it's quiet and eat my doughnut then. I just joined the back of the line when I felt a tap on my shoulder. "Would you like to be my partner?" said a voice. I turned around and, hot potato! It was Jane Dixon. I nearly coughed up a lung. Earlier, I said I don't like surprises. This is because most surprises are terrible. E.g. the spider in your bed, the drawing pin on your chair, the sudden attack by your trousers, etc. However, this surprise was completely different. As I sort of mentioned before, Jane Dixon is, here's a list. 1. Brainy. She sits at the clever table for everything and always has her work up on the board. 2. Well behaved. She's on the school council and she gets merits and certificates all the time. 3. Nice. She does loads of jobs for teachers and helps the little kids when they bump their knees in the playground. Well, what I didn't mention is that she's also, nice, if you know what I mean. She has a nice head and a nice face. Her hair is nice too, like a brown waterfall. But not brown because the water's dirty. I mean brown like hot chocolate. And she smells nice too, like strawberry-flavoured washing powder. Oh, and the best thing about Jane? Her initials are J.D., just like my favourite snack. Jane never normally talks to me. She's like a beautiful golden doughnut in a glass case, something that looks amazing but is painfully out of reach. "Well, I spluttered. "OMG!" announced Rosie Taylor. She always says things like OMG and LOL. She thinks they make her sound cool and grown up. I disagree. "Roman and Jane are boyfriend and girlfriend." The rest of the class gasped, but Jane Dixon calmly turned to Rosie and said 5 incredible words. So what if we are? OMG. and we'll leave it there.